No, Paul, when we go on air, we're not on air yet, right?
No, we are not.
All right. You're gonna take two on that. So I think that's important for you to ask that question
Yes.
and for you to give that answer so it is taped for posterity.
I can only do it once, so it's too
Good day.
Kelsey could explain it.
This guy, we gotta get him an economy with Carlson. You know, all this is calling.
Yeah, and it's not like specific to this data and assessing. This is a general comment, looking across all departments and the budget in general. It just,
Yeah, until they reach step 6, there's some big increases. Once you hit 6, then it's just a call.
Even the number that's shown on the screen, so the department heads have maintained that cap for 2024, for example, in my pay expenses and my salary presently.
Right.
So, department heads aren't part of that step and valuation increase. I still have to get to my evaluations. You're seeing the number you're seeing there. I don't make that yet. And
So,
that's annualized fee.
are we on air?
And
We are on air. Okay, well, welcome everybody to the Thursday, August 1st, first of two 2025 budget workshop presentations by the town of Webster's department heads. I'm asked, will the community be able to see Donna?
Yes.
Okay. This is our first time having a department head present remotely. But before I get into that, I just would like to say that we are a little past halftime of the 2025 budget process. It started back in early May, 3 months ago, and that's when Paul Adams, our finance director, reached out to each of the department heads and asked them to submit their initial asked needs, wants for 2025. So here we are 3 months later. These budget workshops really are the first time that the board is in total and the community gets to see what the proposed 25 budget is. And then if everything goes as planned, this will all culminate in mid-October with the board adopting the 2025 budget. So it's about a 6-month process, so we're about halfway through with plenty of opportunity for the public to see the proposed budget and to chime in. So with that all being said, our first department head tonight, and the first time I think this has ever happened, is Donna Komar, who is the town assessor, and she is wearing a wonderful hat. I thought that she might be at the Kentucky Derby today, but Donna, I'll hand the baton to you.
yeah, I heard that there was a summer theme this year.
Can't hear too well.
Yeah. Paul, did you want to kick off since this is the first meeting? Do you want to kick off with any kind of general comments about the revenue system? Do you want to just jump right in on capital purchases?
well, I just, we could start with the salaries, Donna, and it's not specific to the assessor's salary, but when I was going through the budget, I noticed some very high increases that looked, disproportionately higher than I'm used to seeing elsewhere in the private sector I'll compare it to. And I was just wondering if, I was assuming, but looking for clarification, if that is contractual or why it's so high.
And the reason for that, the employees receive not only COLA, which is 2% for 2025, and they also receive a grade step if they qualify for that. That's if they have not reached the top step and if their evaluation process goes successfully. So in some cases, you'll see a fairly large increase year to year. Could be 6-7% increase one year to the next.
Yeah,
As they reach grade, the top grade is just COLA.
What was the COLA this year?
2%.
2%.
So, I know that Paul and I are accountants by trade. We use acronyms like COLA, so before everybody in the audience or at home thinks that we're giving Pepsi Cola or Coca-Cola to our employees, it's cost of living adjustments, which is a fancy way of saying what is the percentage hourly rate change from year over year or percentage increase in their salary. Most of these, you'll hear this as a common theme through the 14 department heads presentations. Most of the cost of living adjustment, COLAs, and the step increases are contractual based on the 3 union contracts that we have in town. That being white collar, which Donna's department, I think all of your employees are in the white collar except for you, and I think maybe you're a deputy. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is that correct, Paul?
That is correct.
Okay. There is also a blue collar union, which really encompasses the sewer department and the highway department. And then we also have the 1,000 Club, which is the police union. So a lot of these salaries and hourly are tied to the negotiated collective bargaining agreements that this board signed off on back in 2023. I think was when we signed off on blue and white collar agreements, and then earlier this year we signed off on the police union agreement. So if that's TMI, I apologize, but I figured I'd rather the community and everybody understands that, because it does permeate through the whole budget.
And the increase happens at the review versus like January 1st, that's the new salary, or it happens at a review cycle?
January 1st for COLA, and then step increase on the anniversary date.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Donna?
Thank you, Don. All right, forgot about it.
So there is one salary that I could point out, show you that our part-time employee line has decreased because one of our long-term positions that was a higher end position was vacated. And so I have adjusted the budget to reflect that, the assumption that the next person will have to go back through some more training and such. So there is an unusual decrease in salary on that line. We hope to fill that position in 2025. So I asked to leave it in the budget for now, put it at a lower rate. Then you jump down, Paul, to point 2, which is the capital purchases. We have one item there for $1,500, and that is kind of a placeholder number. Our office uses a lot of color, and there's one color copier in the town hall. So when it's down, it kind of shuts down all the departments. We're looking for a tabletop model that would be less expensive than the big workforce that you have in the DPW wing. But we do use the color for our color bar system, that we put the labels in our filing system and the colors match. So we're just looking for the right kind of printer that we could put where we'd be able to print our labels and not have it overlapping with other people's jobs and things, because the labels themselves are specialty. So that would be a big convenience to our partner and efficiency for others when the DPW printers down and someone needed color, to have some kind of a backup for the town hall. Other than that, let's see, let me just highlight a few things. Pretty much this budget is pretty level year over year, just a few fluctuations with small amounts that amounts to, outside of the salary changes, I believe the change in my budget is about $8,700 at my last estimate. So the computer equipment and licensing, things like Microsoft Office licensings and other softwares that we need to pay for, that's pretty stable. Our memberships are stable year over year. There's 2 or 3 of us in the office that are professional members of certain professional organizations. Deeds are pretty stable. Computer expenses, again, that's quite stabilized. Office supplies, that number is up a little bit. There's been general increase in pricing. We've also put a $500 placeholder in here for database would do is it would read our assessment database, it would extract it, and then put it into the papers and the forms and the formats that we need, instead of typing it 4 or 5 times for every application, because you need it in 4 or 5 places. So that is going to be an investment. It's going to save a lot of frustration and time for the staff and the taxpayers alike. So that is my big increase right there, $5,000 asking for the ability to create this custom software. The lady that we worked with before did really a super job with the exemption renewal, so I know we're going to end up with a very good product. Moving along, appraisal and legal contractual expenses. That is when a business owner has taken us to Supreme Court. We may need some appraisals, we may need expert witness testimony, and that is the line that helps fund that, along with any additional attorney expenses that may come up because of those litigation cases. Reassessments, $45,000. I left that in the same as last year because, as you know, we weren't able to launch those first few phases. And we have talked in the past, and we will get into more details in other meetings, but we've talked in the past how we might want to take a step-by-step approach and start building pieces of it together to save us on the large price tag all at once. And so that is just the beginning of getting at our data and looking at some particular properties that we would like to revalue just certain ones. But this is the same budget that was there last year, and we were able to launch that on a 24 roll. So this would be for the 2025 roll.
So Donna, in regards to that line and that amount of money in the step, is the step to manage the expense of a reevaluation over several years? Or is looking at that as a step function of reevaluation more aligned with slowly getting from 52% up to 100%?
Yeah, there's a lot of work that needs to be done to prepare to launch the program, so that's going to help afford that. As you know, now we have a full-time staff appraiser, so that is one of the big expenses that we won't need to take on before we have an appraiser on staff. So looking forward to working closely with our own appraiser on staff. But this money here will be for outside other things, data collection, and where we need to do a large volume all at once. Reworking some of our computer models and things like that. This is to get some of that price tag out of the way up front and get it published so that we can use it confidently before we launch it out on the actual revaluation of things. The actual plan itself, I'm not prepared to get into today. There have been some ideas talked about. I want to talk with some stakeholders before we actually begin to involve the public. But I guarantee that the public will be very involved and very informed when we begin that process. So I hope that answers your question.
It does, thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Software maintenance contracts, we are currently taking a program that we have on our website. If you go to the assessor's pages on the town of Webster's website, you will find an image made online, and there you can look up your property information. It just gives the basic information in easy to understand terms. You don't need to know our jargon, as pointed out earlier. It'll say that you have a ranch house instead of telling you what code number as we are embarking on talking more about a revaluation, changing that tool, relearning that, and having tools that we like to use is not a good idea. So this budget also includes an extra $3,000 for a program we never used to have to pay for. And so that's the other larger increase in my budget this year. You know, that's just automobile maintenance. $500 will cover whatever we need for tires and oil changes and the simple things like that. Any questions I can take from the board?
No, but I have a comment about that software, because I'm very familiar with it. And I did work at Eagle View, so that's also why I'm very familiar with it. And it was unfortunate that the county did decide to go with Nearmap, but the Nearmap solution does not have as clear of imagery in the measurement, which very specifically for assessing many departments, the GIS department, or Parks and Recreation, or other departments, might be very fine with that other solution, but assessing specifically, the assessment department has the ability to measure those buildings right from their desk, and they can get very accurate information without having to go into the field. So that piece of software is very important, and Kristen was very integral in making sure that she had that tool to be able to do her job. So just to add a little more color to that line item.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your support and understanding that. So we can reconcile things while somebody's on the phone that can be talking to us, and we can pull up a picture of the property, see the near maps, we can lose all history because the county is just beginning with that. So with the Eagle View, we can pull up the history and say, oh yeah, I see what you've done there, and you know, it's just a very, very helpful tool. And our staff has learned to, I can measure within a foot. On clear image, I can measure within a foot from my desk, measuring the other side of the building. Sometimes trees get in the way, or the leaves just a little off or something, but generally speaking, it is a very accurate tool for us, and that is why we love it so, and we're just not ready to part with it.
Thank you, Donna.
Thank you, Donna. I have no questions.
Jenny or John?
No, I have no questions. Thanks for your comments and your input with respect to the software. Just goes to show that when you have a varied board that has different backgrounds, it really helps the process, in my opinion.
Jenny?
No, thank you.
Donna, great seeing you. Forward to seeing you at the office. Sure you guys. All right. Thanks for doing this.
All right.
Thanks for
Thank you,
letting me know
Donna.
when I'm
You got it. You got it.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Right.
To the best of my knowledge, the rest of the department heads are presenting in person, starting with Paul Adams, our finance director.
That is correct, Tom. All right. Finance department has currently 4 full-time employees, and each of the full-time employees is up for not only a cost of living increase, but also a step increase. So you see the compensation of employees is actually up about $9,300, or about 5%. We do have some overtime costs, I budget about $5,000 per year. And we do have one part-time person, Paula, who retired about a year and a half ago. Came back part-time. She helps us with a lot of miscellaneous things, such as the grants and some bank recs. So she helps fill in the gaps, working, usually 10 hours a week, but sometimes it's just more than that. So we've got Paula in there for part-time. Capital purchases, flat year to year, nothing specific, just always something that seems to come up. The computer licensing and equipment, I budgeted $7,500, which is actually up quite a bit from the previous year. Windows 10 is sunsetting, which means, from what I understand, we're going to need to get some new computers. So I budgeted not only the license fees for the computer and also $4,500 to replace 3 of the machines. I've increased seminars and conferences by $2,000, trying to encourage the employees to get some continuing education, keeping their CPE up to speed, and helps them develop as a professional. The financial software tools, that includes our Access database, which is used for fixed assets, and it also includes a software called Lease Crunch, which we use to calculate the present value of our leases. It's a requirement of GASB 87, which is, they set the rules and regulations for governmental accounting. Financial consultants, I got it flat year to year at $10,800. This includes lifetime benefit solutions. It includes municipal solutions, who serves as our bond consultant, and it also includes our actuarial services, about $4,500 per year. Office supplies, I've got them actually coming down about $1,000. That's based on history, so from $5,900 to $4,900. Our copier lease, that's expected to stay pretty flat, not an expensive item. And then our software license fees, we're due for an increase on that contract. We'll be coming in 2025. We'll be coming to the end of a 3-year contract. This is with Tyler Technology. They provide Munis software, which controls payroll, accounts payable, general ledger, budgeting, capital projects, the complete financial package. So I'm expecting a slight increase, probably around 4%. So I'm budgeting for that. That will happen, I think, about 3/4 through the year. So it's not going to have a full impact in 2025. And I think that will be another 3-year contract. Computer systems admin, that's an expense that was in there for '24, but it's now included in this $76,000 that we paid to Tyler. A couple of years ago, we went to Tyler actually hosting our data, where prior to that, it was hosted on site on our servers, and then we moved it to the cloud, which is controlled by Tyler. It was a little more expensive, but it saves money in regard to equipment and various time and money that Steve and John and our IT department have to devote to it. A couple small items, bank admin and the director's expenses, no change there. Software conversion costs, I did budget $2,000 in case we need some training for Munis. I know Kelsey and Braden like to fully utilize the capability of Munis, so there's always something that they're getting into to learn. So a training opportunity may come up. And then lastly, we have our audit and accounting fees. I'm expecting that to be up about $3,000, $41,500. That's with our CPA firm, Nicholas Bar. They provide an annual audit, which costs about $30,000. And they also do agreed upon procedure engagements for the court, town clerk, and receiver of taxes. And there also may be a single audit, which is driven by federal money, if it exceeds $750,000. That would be like ARPA money or a federally based grant. So in total, the budget is up about $17,000, or about 3.4%. So overall, it's pretty good.
I have a question about Munis.
Yeah.
Does that by any chance have a module or some sort of feature where you can do expense approvals?
Expense approvals.
Because, yes, and I'll tell you why I'm asking the question.
Employee expense reimbursement?
Employee expense reimbursements, all the stack of paper we have to go through as a board member. Every month you have to review the bills and sign off on the bills. So my thought around that is it's a lot of paper, it's very manually intensive, and it seems like this software has different features and functionalities, and I know it does budgeting and it does a few other things, does it do that?
Yeah, there are ways to automate that and to create workflow for purchase orders. We would have to obtain the module that would allow us to scan and capture images of the documents.
Yep.
We looked into that when we converted payroll a few years ago. It was expensive, so we didn't do it. But I mean, it's something we could consider. It'd be a lot of scanning, but it'd be a lot less paper. You're right, we are
Scanning's free.
heavily paper driven.
Yes, and
Yes.
paper's expensive and scanning is free.
Yeah.
So the
Definitely worth
software
looking
might
into.
cost more upfront,
Eventually, it's safer than paper.
Right.
but eventually you're saving, but not only do you save on paper, you save on time, you improve the speed in which you have reimbursements, you improve employee productivity, so there's lots of benefits to
Something we could look into.
I wasn't planning on broaching this, but I guess I can't help myself. That there are people in the room tonight, Councilman Cahill, who is the IT liaison, Dean Marr, who is our town clerk tax receipt, Chris Bilo, who is our Parks and Rec Commissioner, and yours truly, are 4 of the 8 people that are on a task force that is starting in August to basically discern what we have in internal IT, automations, innovations, all that, but also external, how we customer service to our 45,000 citizens. Are we with the times? Are we looking into the future of how we handle things and what automation and IT we have? And part of that is, and I know we just got a $45,000 grant, is that we are moving toward being less paper. I will not go all the way to say paperless, but we are moving toward less paper. I think there has been unbelievable strides on this with Munis modules from HR. Kelsey, you could talk to that in Brayton's absence. Not that we'll get knee-deep, waist-deep tonight on that. But we need to parlay that and move forward on that. And one of the things this task force is looking at is how we can leverage the power of 14 departments instead of 14 individual departments going off on their own and looking at ways to handle things like credit card payments or going paperless, when maybe right in front of our nose is an option for those things that all 14 departments can use, and that from a budgetary standpoint will cost less, because certainly you're going to get the economies of scale and the discount of a large organization like the town of Webster versus a smaller organization like the finance department in the town of Webster. So we're off and running, aren't we, Deneen? Right? Chris? I had to twist their arms. Please join this committee. I won't get into why I thought that. And Keith Mortimer, our town engineer, is on that committee. It's going to be good. Obviously, the IT staff is on that committee.
Very important.
Pretty important. Pretty important. Any other questions on the finance budget?
No.
No.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay.
You're up.
I have
That's
a,
all.
I have a comment.
Comment.
All right. In the Munis paperwork, and I like the way you presented on the screen. I don't think in the screen presentation is the transfer from the sewer fund of $60,000.
It's not.
Okay. And I'm not sure how much of that is talked to when we do the sewer budget next week, but Patty is the liaison to the sewer department. I think this is something that is a holdover from the 30-plus years ago, that sanitary sewer plants back then were making decisions on whether they go offline and just go to Monroe County Pure Waters. Only a couple of sewer plants, the Village of Webster, the Town of Webster, I think Honeywell Falls Village, decided not to go offline. They decided to run their own sewer plants. From what I've heard, the reasoning was that they were really cash cows, and they brought in enough money through the sewer plant that they helped subsidize other town departments. Actually, there's a name for this. It's called an enterprise fund, right, or a utility
Correct.
something along those lines. The town of Webster never went out and formally turned their sewer plant into a utility, which really means they'd be a separate entity from the town. They would not be on the tax bill, the town tax bill. You'd have a separate bill from that utility. But kind of within that, because it was, I guess for lack of a better term, very supportable, that because of the money that was coming from the sewer department, and they're using resources of the rest of the town government, they're using the finance department, they're using some of the other
Insurance.
departments. And so at least when, I know Patty, 4 years ago, I think there was $250,000 that came out of the sewer budget, a transfer, fund balance, to the finance department, to DPW, to various
Now it's
departments. So
150.
it's down to 150 in
150,000.
aggregate now, because over the years, our sewer plant, at least the last couple of years, is not a cash cow. It might have been back in the 90s.
Anything but.
The problem with a cash cow is that you better make sure as you're bringing in that cash, that you also maybe have put some of that cash away for reserves for when your infrastructure rots.
Right.
Unfortunately, we didn't do that, and so I think everybody knows we're building an $81 million sewer renovation project. It's not a cash cow.
No.
Hopefully in the future, it will be a very vibrant running economic model for the town. But just thought, that is a line item that is in the budget. It is a line item that will be seen by the community if they explode out the budget, a $60,000 transfer from the sewer fund over to finance. There's my TMI explanation,
That's good information.
says you. Okay, Paul, as usual, fantastic.
All right.
You run a great show.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I have good people, including Kelsey.
Well,
Who's next?
good people like to work with good people, right? He's a great boss.
Yes.
Could be working with Brayton. We love Brayton. Kelsey, are you up?
I'm up.
All right.
Where should I present from?
You can sit right here.
Sure.
Breaks on vacation, so Kelsey is going to fill in. She handles the payroll for the town and quite a bit of the HR function as well. We should say that she just passed her professional human resources exam yesterday.
Congratulations,
Yes.
Kelsey, nice work.
Thank you.
Saw it on LinkedIn.
She's certified.
Awesome. And thank you for having me, guys. So just at a quick glance, from the 2024 budget to 2025 budget, it actually decreased $2. So that is always great, regardless of the amount. So in the first line for Director of Personnel, it's only a 2% COLA for 2025. There are no step increases for 2025. For 2025, we do not anticipate any part-time employees, and they're the same for the past couple of years. For capital purchases, that still remains the same. This helps with office equipment, the ID badge that we use, and a few other things as well. For the computer equipment and licensing, that's up a little over $100. That has to do with some Microsoft features that Brayton and I use, and then we also use Adobe Acrobat software, which helps streamline the HR process, onboarding things, lots of digital signatures, plus paper.
Nice.
Yeah. For safety and department-based training, that still remains at $4,500. That deals with permit trainings that Brayton attends, as well as some SHRM trainings, which SHRM trainings, SHRM, stands for the Society of Human Resource Management, so that way he can stay up to date on his HR knowledge. Office supplies still remains the same at $500. Personnel legal expense, this is the biggest increase for the HR budget of $4,000. I would say in 2024, we spent a little bit more than we anticipated in legal expenses, so we thought it would be a good idea for 2025 to increase that a little bit. Obviously, you can't always predict everything that's going to happen in that year, but just kind of a safety net. The software license fees, that is our biggest decrease with the $8,000 decrease. So Brayton and I were looking at a recruitment module in our payroll software. It didn't do everything that we thought it would do and wasn't actually going to save us that much time. So unless they start adding some more upgrades to that module, then at this time we just kind of chop it up as well. Employee recognition still remains the same with the director's expenses. The employee recruitment has a $1,300 increase. Just the general increase of posting job advertisements on Indeed or any other websites. Some of the more, we'll say, technical skill positions have a harder time finding qualified candidates, so a couple times we might have to post them, 2 times throughout the year to get a qualified candidate. Employee wellness was an increase of $600, and that deals with our employee assistance program, which is available to all of our employees as well as all of their dependents. And then this also helps fund the town wellness events that we have throughout the year. And then the last budget line is the background checks, and that still remains the same at the 25. So as you can see, a $2 decrease from 2024 to 2025, but overall pretty consistent.
We don't see that very often.
No.
That's outstanding.
Yeah,
Giving us $2 back.
every dollar counts,
Yes, it does.
just like with the garbage. All the dollars count. And I just want to say thank you for saving $2
Yeah.
and for looking for ways to introduce more paperless features so you can save money there as well and be more productive.
Yeah, it definitely helps. Thank you. Any other questions?
Nope.
Not for HR, but just in general, what you were just saying, Tom, is office supplies and all of that is gonna be looked at with this task force of how to save money? Because if you have each department buying their own office supplies, would there be economies of scale ordering at a town level?
There would, but I don't think this IT innovation, this probably wouldn't have that as one of our things. But taken under advisement, I think we're gonna have a lot bigger things to do than figure out if we can buy paper from a place. Paul, do we right now, are gonna do departments buying paper, or do we buy?
Yeah, they're generally bought off a state or one county contract, so
Okay.
economies of scale that way. Not entirely, but I think for the most part.
There'd be probably volume breaks if you bought more.
Yeah.
by
That's
department.
not to say if you didn't go out and bid it yourself, you'd make it at whatever price.
We'll say this, that human resources, I want to make sure everybody understands that just as recently as 5 or 8 years ago, it was under the finance department, is that correct, Paul?
Right.
Okay. Which isn't unusual, it is for somebody that came from paychecks, right? But I think anybody who has a job or has been in management the last 20 years knows that human resources in an organization has got exponentially more complicated and risky than it was in 2004 than today. So the town as an organization is a microcosm of basically a lot of private industries and whatever trying to invest more in human resources. Because if you don't invest in human resources, for every dollar you don't invest, you will pay maybe $100,000 in legal fees or lawsuit settlements and all of that stuff. That's the world we live in, unfortunately. Brayton Connard, who is our Director of Human Resources, when we hired him a couple years ago, I basically said 2 things to him. First of all, I thought he'd only be here for 2 years. He was overqualified for the position. So I was realistic that he probably would use it as a stepping stone to go to someplace else. He's told me, and I'll take his word for it, that something unusual what happened. He likes working here. So he's been here 4 years now, right? Is it 5? 4. 4. But his task, his charge, was twofold. Centralize human resources. Because when I walked in the door back in 2020, there was a semblance of the department head was left to their own devices of managing the human resources of their department. That was very common back in the 1980s, 1990s, early 2000s. That is not fair to take Chris Bilo, who has got a skill set of running parks and management, and making you a human resource person. Not with all the complexities and legalities and things like that. So he was tasked with centralizing it, and he was tasked with automating it, because there was papers flying around like I'd never seen. And I gotta give the guy credit, I think he's accomplished both. Now, along those lines, I joked that, hey, you could have Brayton as your boss. Kelsey, I gotta give Brayton a lot of credit. I think he was the one that said, you really should go and take this HR. You know what I mean? I give him a lot of credit. He's trying to bring up the next generation of HR, and I think Kelsey, pitching the budget today, I think we might have our bench right there to come in to be the person in the future.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
We got a deep bench.
We have a deep bench. And I will also say that I have said to Brayton, all right, we're going to stay ahead of schedule. Chief, you'll be up there before 5:15. To this guy's credit, I said to him a couple of months ago, I want you to think long and hard about proposing in the 2025 budget another full-time equivalent position in HR. We've made such strides in HR in the last 4 or 5 years, but the reality is we're in a $47 million expense organization, the majority of that being payroll and benefits. 280 full-time positions, 220 part-time positions, and we have 1 HR person, an extremely talented one. And I said, I think we need to talk about getting, some semblance of a second position there. He came back to me and said, nah, we don't need to do that in 2025. He's very budget conscious. He grew up in this model in government. In a lot of ways, because finance and HR were combined years ago, I would say that 5 years ago, there was a person in your department, Paul, that was half your department, half HR.
Yes.
Okay. Kelsey, you do a lot in HR, but all of your pay and everything is slotted in finance. So we somewhat have 1.5 people in HR right now, but it's just something I want the board, and I want the community also to know that this is something as we go on. When you look at the metrics of our size as an organization, investing in more HR is going to save this town a lot of money. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, but the world is something else in 2024. And if you don't have your HR locked down, you will pay. You will pay. So, 5:15, Chief. We're on time, even with my monologues, Anthony.
Prefer to get the podium, does that work?
You want to do it for me? Sure.
Got it.
Whatever you prefer. All right. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. I appreciate it.
Good evening.
Good evening, Chief.
I'm good. Got the silence.
Sorry about that.
No, that's all right.
Just focused on switching gears.
The transition, yeah. So overall, our 2025 budget is, like I think the previous discussions, mostly focused on personnel. The other categories and areas of it are intended to help improve officer confidence and well-being, and making their jobs more functional and efficient.
So as I go through, that's kind of the underlying theme. It's a headcount neutral budget. We're not looking to add any positions that weren't in our '24 budget. So I'm going to explain a couple things along the way here to help understand some of the significant increases. So obviously, the first one is my salary set by the white collar cost of living contract 2% increase for 24 to 25. Other components of that are longevity and education incentive that reflect that a little bit. For the officer salaries, it's a little misleading with the jump from 24 to 25. When we went into 2024, it was the beginning of a contract year for the 1,000 Club. So that contract wasn't settled during the '24 budget process. So the number you see for 2024 is essentially the 2023 number plus the contractual and step increases that occurred that year. It did not have any cost of living adjustment that was because that wasn't decided until later into the year after the budget was already in place. So the 2024 number, you actually would add 3% to that number under the officer-based salaries, which would bring that number up to approximately $3,412,000. And then in 2025, there's a contractual 4% increase. So that's where you get the additional amount of approximately $135,000. And then also contractual are step increases for officers' time on the job and longevity for years of service. So the step increases account for about $45,000 of that number, and longevity is about $9,000. So that's where we get to the $3,629,000 change number. So it's 2023 budget plus 3%, then plus 4%, plus contractual steps, plus longevity increases. So that's where that dollar amount comes from. So that covers 34 sworn personnel, from the captain down to the ranks. The salary compensation for retirements, we are budgeting that as we did in 2024. That's not a line that gets used every year. The way the contract works is upon completion of service for retirement purposes only. There's buyout of sick time and a couple other banks like vacation, downtime, things like that. So typically, we budget for an expected number to leave during that contractual time period or the budget time frame. In 2025, we'll have 2 personnel that are eligible to leave. What we've seen in law enforcement recently is very few people stay beyond the 20-year mark. Some stay a couple of years beyond that, but we typically see people leave closer to 20 than we had in previous years. So we expect to at least use a portion of that, if not all of it. Holiday pay, again, is another contractual benefit. So because police officers can't take the day off on town holidays, and for other town members, they're obligated to work for public safety reasons, they're compensated in different ways. So they can either take that holiday pay that the other town employees get and get straight pay during the pay period, or they have the ability to reflect that over to comp time that they can then take time off the road when staffing allows. So the holiday pay, we budget at $40,000, and then it'll come in somewhere around the number or below, depending on each calendar year how the officers elect to receive that compensation. So it's not a direct payout, because sometimes it benefits the taxpayer for the officers to be able to use that time for time off as opposed to getting direct paid compensation. Police overtime, we've increased for the 25 budget. We've seen significant use of the overtime. Obviously, we have an obligation to cover our public safety responsibilities on the road. We have a kind of fixed headcount, obviously, because of the long-term expense of employees and how it's a significant portion of our budget already. So when we have unexpected absences, or absences that reduce coverage on the road, we're still obligated to have that staffing. So we've seen an increase in our expenses when it comes to overtime. So we're trying to budget that appropriately based on expectations. We try to separate out a couple different types of overtime. So there's a couple lines here related to overtime. The police overtime line, the large number is for general purposes, and then there's a couple specific uses that we have broken out. For DWI and traffic safety, we get reimbursed that overtime as part of county and state grants. So we account for that out of a separate line in order to maintain accuracy there. I'm going to skip the bio for a second, go to reimbursable compensation. That is also an overtime line. That's if a private party requests police presence and we're in staff with overtime, we then bill them. Examples of that would be like the turkey trot, other events where the special police in the past may have a supplemented staffing without tax dollars. We charge that cost back to the private entity in order to recoup that. So we track that separately. And then skipping down a little further to the overtime school resource officers, again, that's reimbursed by the school district. That's overtime that is directly related to school events that we bill to them based on what they're asking of our officers to do, so that it's not reflected out of our tax dollars, it's reimbursed to the school district. So going back to clerical salaries, so those were the overtime lines that are kind of spread out. We have 4 currently staffed full-time clerical positions. We have an authorized position from 2024 for an additional clerk that we haven't filled yet. We're in the process of working through that job duties and descriptions right now, and we'll have that position in place prior to the start of 25 budget. So that dollar amount reflects 5 full-time clerical staff. So that would be 4 clerks and our property clerk slash quartermaster. Clerical overtime is very rare, but we have at least a small amount of money allotted to that in case it happens. And our part-time employee wages, that is our fleet vehicle assistant. Basically, with the amount of vehicles that we have, I think we're 25 total vehicles in the department. There's a lot of maintenance that has to happen to those vehicles, from tire changes, oil changes, mechanic issues. We utilize this person to shuttle vehicles back and forth. I know we had a discussion a couple months ago, now I think it was, about our contract for vehicle maintenance. He doesn't do the shuttling back and forth to Avon, that's done by that vendor. This is for like the trips in town to like Goodyear, oil changes, car washes, those kinds of things. So he helps keep the fleet running at a very effective cost. School crossing guards, again, that's a function that has kind of a limited application. There's one crossing point on Clem Road in front of Clem North and Clem South to help the students that live in the neighborhoods across the street cross Clem Road safely. So it's staffed and funded by the police department. And if we don't have a part-timer in the non-duty road patrol, we'll go down and assist with covering that for child safety. So again, that's been a pretty steady cost across the years. Tobacco compliance, again, that's grant reimbursed if we utilize that. I reduced it because we do a lot of on-duty staffing. That hasn't really had a lot of overtime impact on that, but it'll be reimbursed through the county program. Computer equipment and licensing, there's been a lot of conversation about that. Obviously, we moved that to the cost center to the departments a couple of years ago. So for us, we have a number of computers to deal with. We have 26 fixed computers in the department. Some of them are communal computers for the officers to use. They're not assigned each individual one. And then we have we've started our transition to kind of a mobile work environment. So as much as we can, we've started to change our administrative and investigative staff over to mobile work platforms so that they can be functional in other areas than just our offices. Obviously, that ties into the IT task force we're talking about, as far as automation and the infrastructure of our network and how to make that more efficient. But we've started that process already. So between the 26 fixed stations and the 7 mobile computers that we have to keep a rotation going for replacing those in an effective manner with the updates that are happening through the software services. So that's where that dollar amount comes from. It's a combination of user licenses, which will be about $20,000, about $13,500 for new computers, and an additional $2,500 for equipment to support those computers. Next, we get into our capital purchasing section. So for office, we've been working over the last couple of years to update the facility with some of the equipment. Some of the equipment that is currently still in service as far as furniture goes for the patrol officers is from the 1998 renovation that happened. So we're over that kind of 25-year shelf life of some of the equipment that the officers are performing with. Some of it was more recent, but it gets beat up over the years. So we're going to continue to improve their work environment with some new equipment, desks and chairs. And then we're also retrofitting one of the old storage areas or office areas for a training environment to help with some of the in-service training requirements we have for officers. So we're working with both of those out of that capital office line. So for miscellaneous, when became aware of the sewer renovation project and what they're doing down there, for those who don't know, we have a range, firearms range that's located at the sewer plant. As the project has progressed there, we've kind of transitioned that range to be a little bit more functional. So it required moving it to accommodate one of the clarifiers that went in. So when that happened, we started to slowly over the years kind of improve the conditions down there. We have a little shed down there, we have a barrier wall to protect the clarifiers and all of the sewer operation. We now have the ability, or the opportunity, I guess that would be the right word, is to tie electrical into the building we have down there as part of the sewer project that's happening, or the next phase of the sewer project. So we originally were going to tend to use drug acid seizure money for that expense when we went through the approval process this year to implement it. As it happens, this year for 2025, they've changed the rules on drug acid seizure and what it can be used for, and that project will no longer qualify for that expense. So we've moved that expense into this budget line here, capital purchase miscellaneous, in order to install electrical to the range building down there. For firearms, in '24 we had a increase. Like I said, we've been working to improve our officers' capabilities. One of the new technology things that has been proven to have a difference in life and death confrontations is the red dot optics that are now functional on pistols. So a number of years ago, we installed them on all our rifles because that was the platform that they initially were designed for, but now through technology, they're rugged and very effective on duty pistols. So this year, we're in the selection process, and we're going to implement the red dot optics. So in '25, we've reduced that capital expense back down to our regular kind of program for purchasing other equipment, like the long rifles. So tying to the officer confidence and defensibility, we've done individual issue of patrol rifles for officer confidence in deploying those weapons. And we're going to continue to purchase and outfit 8 more rifles in 2025 in order to complete that project. For technical services, capital purchase, we're going to purchase and implement a second speed trailer. I think everybody on the board's aware of the number of speed complaints we get, and it's probably the #1 consistent issue that we want to address with our community to help keep them safe. We have a current speed trailer that we worked with our communications director on to get some online request and reporting set up on, and we've been inundated with requests to have the street trailer deployed to help educate people and reduce speeds in neighborhoods. So we're going to outfit a second trailer, because obviously the functional window for us in the town of Webster, weather-wise, for getting trailers out and not having them implement or impede the snow removal process is fairly limited, so we want to try to maximize as much as we can during good weather. So we're going to implement a second trailer for that. For, let's see where we're next, the vehicle accessories. So, like I mentioned before, we have 25 total vehicles. We have 13 patrol, 6 unmarked, 6 special purpose vehicles. So we have a fairly consistent rotation of 3 vehicles a year in order to keep that fleet operational. This year we're going to do 2 marked, 1 unmarked. So the vehicle setup ties directly to that. Unmarked don't require as much vehicle accessories as the patrol units do, and the vehicles don't cost as much. So the next 2 lines are both reduced to reflect the needs. So that is, yeah, so for 2 marked, 1 unmarked vehicle and the setup that goes along with it. So it depends on what we're able to purchase on bid as far as the equipment, as to what transfers one vehicle to the other. Sometimes not all the equipment is compatible with the new make and model that we're able to acquire. So vehicle purchasing for police fleets has been very tumultuous over the last couple of years. A couple of the major manufacturers have either slowed or stopped making patrol-ready vehicles. So we have a mix of Ford and Dodge vehicles that we've been putting in service. Our unmarks this year will probably start to transition to another manufacturer as well, just because they're not as available. Capital purchase DWI equipment, that typically goes towards radar units and roadside screening devices, things like that. So that'll continue to keep that functional. Professional development is for conferences and associations for the chief in order to keep current with information. Our court, I lost track where it was, the court costs for retired officers. We haven't really seen a significant impact on that, but there are times where officers who have retired are required to report and testify in cases that occurred during their employment, and we are required to compensate them for that. So there hasn't been a huge use of that, but it's available if necessary. With our cellular telephones, a couple of, I think it was in the 24 budget cycle, if I remember correctly, we saw a significant increase in the telephone system within the town hall. Prior to that, all our patrol officers had voicemail systems that were part of that network. That was usually, or used to be at a reduced rate. The provider of that service stopped doing the reduced rate and whole account for each officer, which they wouldn't utilize the other functions of it. So we took advantage of that concept and some of the other impacts we've seen with police communications and transition to individual device issue for the officers for cellular telephones. So we moved to the FirstNet platform to ensure communications, and prior to implementation, officers were using their personal phones frequently related to job duties. And if that communication contained any evidentiary value, it subjected their personal devices potentially to discovery and things like that, as that court realm kind of progressed and evolved with communication. So we tried to get ahead of that. We've issued new devices, and that's worked out very effectively for us. So the increase in the line item is reflective of that. Office expense. So that a lot of report forms, a lot of things we use are now electronic. So as a county, we went away from handwritten police reports. We have a mobile electronic reporting system, so that is mostly paperless. We have some forms, though, that aren't included within that county network that do require individual form purchase. Other than that, it also includes things like the destruction barrels and things for drug collection and destruction, things like that. Lease and rental, that's for copiers, so that is pretty consistent based on the contract price of the monthly maintenance. The next line item, service contracts, that's like the evolution of everything else we've seen. Software as a service, it's where we utilize a lot of our software programs to either conduct investigations or facilitate investigations. So some of those line items are related to investigative options the officers have to look up information. Some of them are related to plate readers and the automated systems on the cars. Provision is included in there, that's our body camera vendor, so the annual subscription for that and storage of data. Traffic Logic, which is the speed signs that we can put out or that are out at fixed locations that transmit speed collection data through a software program. Lexipol, our new policy manual that's in the process of being implemented, that takes us away from the old handwritten general orders and self-maintained to a service that maintains and updates those as the laws evolve and provides policy guidance that you can accept and implement, along with a couple others. So that's it's kind of the catch-all for all the different software as a service systems that we use to facilitate the police department. Shipping expense, that's a kind of nominal number there that sometimes is related to investigations, sometimes is related to testing of equipment and returning it, things like that. Telephone expense, again, we transitioned away from the officers having accounts within that system on mobile devices, so we've reduced that line item to reflect that. Computer expense, so that was a line that was budgeted previously, but it really isn't utilized. The stuff that was captured in that prior to can be associated with different line items, so I've zeroed that out in order to make it more functional. Community service, again, we don't have a community service unit dedicated to that function. We used to, but our officers still perform that function on duty in conjunction with everything else they do. So we still buy equipment for tables at community events, stickers and things for tours and kids to pass out to. Firearm expense, that's non-capital purchase stuff. That's the targets, the ammunitions, things that get expended within the budget year. The prices on that have fluctuated, but we're pretty consistent over the last couple of years with what we're spending on that. Investigative expense has seen an increase. Part of that is DNA testing and some of the other investigations that we're involved in that require a third-party lab service in order to test some of the evidence. So we've seen an increase in utilizing some of those things to facilitate some of the larger investigations. Technical service expenses, those are things that, again, through the budget year get used up from the technical aspect of law enforcement, processing crime scenes and things like that, and the equipment that goes along with it. Miscellaneous equipment typically covers things like AED batteries, AD units, the taser cartridges, things. We had an increased expense in '24. We've reduced that back down to expected expenditure in '25, which was more consistent with what it was in '23. Vehicle repair. So the vehicle repair line is a little misleading. A lot of our major vehicle repairs are usually in conjunction with a fleet vehicle accident. And a lot of times that's money that's recovered through the insurance process. So
Which is
it's not-
recorded as revenue.
Yeah, so they'll show in the revenue. It's hard to project that though, as to what the payouts are gonna be from insurance companies and whether it's gonna be completely covered. So vehicle repairs typically are minimal for the maintenance of the vehicles. Sometimes there's transmission issues or brake issues or whatever, but the larger expenses are usually related to a fleet vehicle accident. Vehicle tires, so we do winter tires, summer tires, we're pretty efficient with that. We cut down the expense a couple of years ago by going to a service that comes out twice a year to do the changeover for us. It greatly reduced both our time and expenses related to the tire changeover. So now most of that is just the replacing of tires as they become worn out through use. Vehicle gasoline, we've seen somewhat of a decrease. We budgeted kind of reflective of where the cost of fuel was over the last couple of years. We're able to reduce our projection down a little bit for 2025, so we've cut out some of the expense there. Vehicle oil, again, it's a pretty consistent because of the amount of service time our vehicles have. Essentially with our patrol vehicles, they run their entire shift. The way the electronics and computer systems are integrated into the vehicle system now, it's not like the old days where the car would turn off and the computer would stay on. There is a number of systems running in there that the car has to stay running. So the idle time on the cars is fairly high, so we have a frequent maintenance schedule on oil changeover in order to keep the vehicles from having a negative impact as a result of that. Clothing expense, we've seen somewhat of an increase with that over the last couple of years, so that's pretty consistent with the cost of replacing uniforms, and 2 years, over the last 2 years we've changed our vendors and style uniforms, but essentially a main portion of that expense is the replacement of the ballistic vests. They're on a 5-year rotation for each officer. So as officers get hired, and then every 5 years we have to replace that based on manufacturer recommendation. So that is probably the largest component of that. EAP it's not a new line, but it's a new expense in my opinion. So in the past, we've relied on third-party vendors for EAP services, and I think over the last few years in public safety in general, law enforcement specifically, we've seen more of a focus on employee wellness and officer wellness. We have an opportunity to join a program that the Sheriff's Department is actually running, where it is a cost based on head count, where we participate in that program. So that's what I'm proposing for 2025. Essentially what it does, it gives us access to, I think it's 4 or 5 EAP professionals that can help officers deal with stress, deal with issues that they're being confronted with, or also offer wellness events in order to alleviate anything from getting to a catastrophic point. So that's probably the only new item in the budget that's different concept than what we've done in the past. Everything else is kind of maintenance of the programs that we've had. Physical expense, again, it depends on the hiring process. If we take transfers, we bear the cost of all of the onboarding and testing. If it's a recruit through the academy, hired through that process, Monroe County bears the cost of that. So there's some fluctuation in that line depending on where we're hiring from at the time. So the last 3 hires have all been recruits through the academy, so we haven't had to spend a lot on the hiring process or the onboarding process. Training is a continual focus of law enforcement. Supervision and training are the 2 key components that an organization has to maintain in order to be defensible through any kind of civil litigation. So that's a pretty consistent and robust process we have each year. We utilize as much as we can in-house. HR has been great getting us to improve our access to online training through like the perma portal and things like that. We assigned probably more training than the officers in process in 24 through that perma thing, but it's been some very interesting topics, and it brings a different perspective to, I think, some of the officers' thought processes. So that's what that is for. And miscellaneous expenses and supplies have been kind of consistent through the years. Some of those things involve awards, miscellaneous items for the department, and there isn't really one big expense out of there to point to say that that's really what that's for. And then the uniform cleaning is contractual. That is between the 1,000 Club and the town. That outlines that the town will supplement in $600 annually for the dry cleaning services that the officers utilize. So that brings our expenses, again, so it looks like a $340,000 increase from 24 to 25. It's not, it is on paper, but it's not the whole story. Like I said, the 3% on top of the 23 salaries is approximately 100,000 of that increase. And then the 4% increase in our largest service line, I think makes up the bulk of the rest of that. So jumping into, do you want to talk about expenses first, or do you want to go right to revenues?
I just have a comment,
Revenues,
question.
from being the school resource officer.
Pardon?
The revenues are minimal except for the school resource officer.
So,
Yeah, why did that one go down?
So in 24, we had, for most of the year, one officer assigned in 24. The revenue that comes from that depends on which officers are assigned and their seniority level, what their pay is. So there's a agreement between the school district and town that they pay 75% of the total expense of the officer. So it depends on who's assigned there as to what projected revenue is.
So it can vary.
What was your question?
So, on police overtime, we're spending a lot of money, and instead of decreasing the amount of money we're spending in overtime, we're planning to increase the amount of money we're spending. So I guess my question would be, going down the road 2-3 years, do you envision that number continuing to go up, or are you working with headcount or some manner to bring that number down?
So we're always working to bring it down. I mean, that is a functional goal of the organization, is to manage overtime. Outside of our personnel expenses, that is our largest expense.
Right.
So do I see it continuing to increase? Not necessarily, no. I think that 2024 has shown us some of the challenges that we face in law enforcement these days. So during 2024 and into, so from 23 into 24, we had a number of officers that were on the books but out of work. So our actual operational headcount on the road was down between 5 and 6 people.
Right.
And so in the 23 budget, most of the increased overtime was covered by non-expenditure of the personnel line. So there's hiring challenges, so sometimes we don't fully expend in the personnel line. So if you don't have that headcount, you're going to have an increase in overtime to cover it. Not that we want to do it that way, but it actually is, if there's the right balance of it, it's a better fiscal option to take overtime than it is to have headcount per se. Headcount gives you one additional person on one shift. Overtime is somewhat flexible if it's spread out and controlled in order to not pay a full salary and benefits. That only gives you essentially an 8-hour impact in a 24-hour day. So not saying that we're trying to maintain overtime, we're trying to reduce it every step of the way. The challenges are that sometimes we have long-term injuries, so we had an officer out for a little over a year that was injured making an arrest. during some of our disciplinary processes, we have officers who are being paid but not able to work the road.
Right.
So we have to pay overtime to fill those positions. Sometimes that's expensive. So to cover a shift for a sergeant for 8 hours, it's $700 a day in overtime. So that's where we can't staff extra sergeants, but we have an obligation to have a supervisor on the road at all times. So those are some of the discussions we have behind the scenes in order to try to minimize the impact of that. But sometimes there's, I guess there's a couple of categories that are built into that overtime. One is critical events that require officers to stay beyond their shift that aren't directly related to staffing, it's more related to operations. There's times where it's for the expected vacancies, like vacation time, training time, when we take an officer off the road to go to school for a week. We don't have additional people, especially at the supervisory level, in order to backfill those without overtime expense. And then the third one is kind of unexpected vacancies where we have either an off-duty injury where officers can't work the road, because that's one of the challenges that we face that not every department faces, that if somebody sprains their ankle, they're going to be using sick time for a longer period of time in law enforcement than they would in maybe some other positions, because they can't get fully cleared for duty. So I think, hopefully to answer your question in a summary here, yes, we try to control it. 2, I don't think it's going to continue to climb the way we've seen it. I think we were perhaps lucky for a couple of years with the COVID era, where there wasn't a lot of police training and there wasn't a lot of additional operational requirements on the organization. I think we're coming out of that, or fully out of that, where we experience more similar to pre-COVID eras of overtime requirements for law enforcement.
Do you have the headcount that you need right now, though, as far as operating officers?
So we are fully staffed headcount-wise, and that's actually one of the current budget challenges that we have. So we have 35 headcount, but we only have 30 operational. Between, and again, for law enforcement, the training cycle is long. So we have 2 in the academy, we have 1 field training. The 2 in the academy won't be out on the road for an additional 6 months. So we're expending on the personnel line to staff to pay their position, but we're paying overtime for vacancies on the road on top of that. So it's a little bit different than 23. 24 is a little bit of a heavier lift and a bigger burden based on some of the other challenges.
Thank you, Chief, appreciate it. That's all I have.
So just to cover the revenues, probably, like the finance director said, the school district's the biggest one. We have an agreement that they cover 75% of the total cost, not just salary, but the benefits as well. And then they essentially get 75% of the use of the officer by having them in school during the school year. In the summer, both officers set agreements for 2 positions. The officers come back to the road and work as traffic detail cars or supplement road staffing, and the same thing on holiday breaks and weekends during the year. Some of the other revenues there are grant reimbursements, expected reimbursement of overtime for the private events. We have fingerprinting revenue from people that come in for like passports, fingerprint, or job applications and licensing and things like that. And the one that's probably the most unknown is police unclassified. We do try to utilize some of the services that are out there to get rid of surplus equipment in order to get revenue from that. And so we see a little bit of that. That's in there. I'm going to jump to animal control.
We're behind schedule, but we can.
I'll talk fast. Animal control is a long factor. So we don't have a full-time animal control position. We utilize that service through part-time positions. So we have a lead animal control officer that is controlling or kind of running the organization and coordinating the other part-timers. A couple basic expenses that are attributed to their operation. obviously the computer licensing, equipment through either new technology or replacing some of the worn out equipment. We're looking to transfer, or not even transfer, allocate some of these expenses correctly. In '24, some of these expenses were directly tied to the police budget. Since there already is an existing animal control budget, we're going to try to have those more accounted for in their system. The big thing that we've seen kind of increase in is the employee vaccinations. With a part-time staff that sometimes has turnover, getting the proper vaccinations can be expensive. The animal control seminar has an expense of $1,500, but it actually has a projected revenue higher than that. So that's, in summary, the animal control. If you have any specific questions.
Don't you worry, Paul, we'll get back on track in time, okay?
I brought a lot of words tonight, sorry.
No, but I mean, you know, in hindsight, when you set up the schedule, 15-minute slot for a department that is large in the budget, that's not practical.
All department reports are not.
Yes, true.
Yeah, well, I mean,
But triple
you're
that.
correct, I
Equal
don't
in
want to,
importance,
you know,
but
I
not
hope you
in
don't
length.
take that the wrong way.
No, they're
The smaller
Equally important, but there's more detail to some.
Thank you. But, does anybody else have any questions?
I just have one question about the speed trailer,
Yes.
because they're fairly expensive, and one of the things we talked about that came up with the ARPA funds, and I asked about were those smaller signs.
Yeah.
What is the benefit of a trailer versus those smaller signs that can be placed in more places throughout the town?
Typically data collection. So a lot of the smaller signs that you see don't actually collect and transmit data. They're there for an awareness to reflect to that person at that moment what their speed is. And they have a great benefit. Those signs that we use actually have cellular cards in them and send the data back to the network, software as a service. So from fixed locations in our trailer, they go a little bit beyond just the awareness level. They help us with targeted enforcement. So the expense I would try to divide out as to whether that location was intended to be awareness or whether it was intended to help assist with enforcement. So the benefit of the trailer is that it allows us to rotate it every week to different locations and collect more data than we would be able to afford data collection signs that are out there.
Can you respond
Thanks.
about enforcement? Like, is it taking a picture of a license plate, and then if they're going over a certain speed, you're gonna issue tickets?
No, it's more helps us know when to schedule a detail and then when to put a physical person out there to take enforcement action. So a lot of, it's very valid. A lot of people have concerns about speed in their neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Sometimes we find that that's a lack of education to either the driver or the observer as to what the actual speed of the vehicle is. People aren't trained in speed estimation, so
Right.
sometimes the benefit of the sign is that one, slow people down and make the driver aware. Because again, when it comes to vehicle safety, it's voluntary compliance. I mean, the person operating the vehicle has to voluntarily comply with whatever the rules are in order to ensure safety. The goal of enforcement is to have them voluntarily comply after the enforcement action. So the general complaints from people that there's cars speeding in my neighborhood don't help us designate when we're going to actually pay an officer to go sit out there and try to fix.
No, I think that's a great idea. And to Jennifer's point, I know that in Spencerport, as you enter into the village, they have a sign with a light, and it tells you how fast you're going, and you get a mad face if you're going over 30.
Yeah.
You get a thank you if you're under 30. But this is not what we're talking about. You're talking about a mobile trailer that'll tell you exactly how fast you're going, and also will feed back information so that you will ultimately, if necessary, set up an officer with a speed gun, right?
Yeah, and there's a couple ways to deal with that. So sometimes it's when we get the data and we look at it, is that there's maybe some specific violators at very specific times. And then when you go back to the people who have called in the complaints or looked at it, we say, okay, from this time to this time, which vehicle is that? And it ends up being most times somebody in their neighborhood that
Right.
is the violator. But it allows us to then get down to a specific issue to deal with instead of trying to generally enforce it.
Thank you very much, yeah.
That was helpful.
Just to put a ribbon on that, and Jen, I think you prefaced the question by saying that there's some ARPA money potentially set aside for this. 5 months to the day, because we're at August 1st, we will have to all commit under whatever we're in contract. We got about $750,000 or something like
Needs
that.
to be obligated by the end of this year.
Yeah, your April 30th report, I think we split it up in 5 or 6 projects at about 125, 150 per project. And one of them we earmarked was the speed signs. Now, Chief, Paul, correct me if I'm wrong on this, or Kat, you got the data collection ones, like the mobile ones that you can hook on the trailer and go around. You have data collection ones that we can hook up to the speed sign, and it'll collect data. If that's the way we go, those are exponentially more expensive because of the technology and this and that. That's really more of a police department thing. If the town board decides that we're going with ones that are just picking up solar or whatever, just telling you what your speed is as you go by it, that's gonna be the highway department. They'll go and put them on the signs. They do not collect data. They just tell you that you're going 37 miles per hour, and it's attached to a speed limit sign that says 30.
Mhm.
Is that pretty accurate?
That would be my advice, yes.
Okay.
Well, I asked if it was accurate. Those are the two different.
Yeah, so there's two different ones. So-
And, you know, we can have all the bells and the whistles in the world, but, you know, the ARPA money will pay for the unit, but then there would be operational costs going on, and if cell phone 5G changes, so there's analysis that has to be done on that, and we have 5 months to go, so.
Well, it was just an option on the list, and it was
Sure.
one of the potential things, and my thought, it would be the less expensive ones that were more for awareness than data collection, so that you don't have to worry about that
And that-
ongoing
but-
maintenance.
Yeah, next week when Pat Stevens is in here, we can bring it up again, because that would fall into the highway department purview. I think, so. All right, thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
We're not gonna short you, Chris, all right? Because nor are we gonna short the judges or Bridget, because the town board regular meeting is scheduled for 6:30. We can start that 5 or 10 minutes late. We cannot start at 5 or 10 minutes early.
Yeah, I thought, why is it at 6:30? I thought they all had to be started.
No,
Okay.
we can, as long as we give proper notice of it, it can be any time that we want it to be. We try to keep it consistent at 7:30, but we figured we'd be done with this at 6:15. We were wrong, and that we would roll into a meeting at 6:30. Very simple. A regular meeting with resolutions, conducting town government business. You posted that it starts at 6:30, better not start at 6:15,
I got it.
but you can start at
I
6:45.
thought there was something magical about 7:30, so thank you for that
No magic.
clarification.
Chris, go.
All right, so before I get into the lines, and I'm not gonna go through each one of the lines. I'll hit on some of the highlights like I typically do where there's changes. I do have a few bullets though I wanna go over before I get into that. So just overall from a revenue standpoint, as you know or recall, Parks and Rec Department is actually broken into 3 departments. So between the 3 departments, this year our revenue is, our expectation for revenue in '25 is $1,214,600. That's compared to our '24 budget, which was budgeted for just over $1 million at $1,053,100. So that department-wide, between those 3 departments, is about a 15% increase in revenue that we're expecting for '25. From an expense standpoint, between, again, all 3 departments in '25, our estimation is going to be around $2,797,872 compared to the '24 budget, which was 2.5 million. So this is an increase in expense for '25, right around 10%. Now I will note, and I'll go through this here in a minute, We do have a very large capital project in our parks department that is around a $200,000 expense. If we were to take that capital project out, fund it in a different way, that would bring our expense for that department, or for all three departments, down to about a 3% increase. So I'll go through that though as I get to it. 25 budget does include the request for a full-time position within our recreation department. This position obviously would assist with creating of programs, which obviously has an impact on our revenue. Currently, our programming structure is made up of 4 full-time program staff within the recreation side of the department. From a benchmark standpoint, Webster, our department is one of the smallest recreation departments from a staffing standpoint, from similar sized municipalities. So as we continue to see our programs increase in regards to the number and the number of attendance, it's putting a strain on our recreation side. So the time is appropriate for us to be able to look to add another full-time person to the recreation side. The parks department does have some savings in full-time salaries of about $42,000. As you may recall, we no longer have a foreman position. We replaced that with a GEO position within the department, so that's resulted in about a $42,000 savings within our full-time salaries. Obviously, we look to continue to cut costs where possible in each one of our lines. One good example, this past year, in the middle of the year, we were able to switch our credit card processing from Plug and Pay to PayTrack. This did actually 2 things. It aligned our credit card processor with a registration system, and it reduced our monthly cost. We ran the figures this past May's credit card fees were around $2,700. A year ago, they were about $3,700, so there was a $1,000 savings in year to year for just 1 month. Year to date, from a department standpoint, we've produced just over 300 programs at 309 programs, which is an increase of about 36 programs compared to the same period in 2023. We've had 39 special events that have been offered to the community on a monthly basis. Those ranged in everywhere from family events to senior activities. Both of those are department highs in. I'd also always mention that quality of service has increased. From a fitness standpoint, we've seen a steady increase in our fitness membership. Current membership billing base is at 512, which is about 50 more billable units than it was in 24 during the June installment bill. So we're continuing to see increase in our fitness membership. Insurance-based revenue is at an all-time high. Currently, our revenue for our insurance-based revenue is at about 110% of our budget for 24. So that's very good. In our current program line for Webster Parks, Webster internal program line is at about 136% of revenue for 24. So our revenue continues to see very good numbers as we go through the year. So those are some of the highlights as I go through these lines. And again, if there's questions anybody has specific to one of the lines, please ask. A number of them are very similar from year to year, as they're just standard cost. 6772 is where we'll start. That's a program for the aging, that's our senior line. From an expense standpoint, no real major changes to that line. Obviously, salary lines, as Chief and everybody has said so far in their presentation, just from cost of living, step increases, etc., where we're seeing our changes. The minimum wage act does have a large impact on our department, as we have a number of part-time employees. We're not just straight full-time, so we have a large number of employees, 120 plus that we have, so that the minimum wage impact going to 1550 next year does have an impact on us. So from a total expense standpoint for our senior, slightly up, and again, most of that is attributed straight to salaries. Underneath that is the revenue side. As you can see, it does show an increase of about $25,000. Most of that we see is our reimbursement from the county. We've seen the last 2 years that our reimbursement for the county has started to trend upward, so that's a positive sign that we're starting to see more activity in the facility, especially on the senior side. So we budgeted accordingly for that. Any questions on program review? Recreation expense, we're gonna do the same thing again, salary wise, it's kind of at the top, where we see most of our increase. I will point out 10043, that is a part-time position. Last year that was budgeted in actually 2 different lines when it should have been in one. We didn't catch it until after the budget had been approved. The numbers were there, but we needed to put it into one line, so that's why this year it shows as its own line. 10088 is where our new full-time rep position will be housed. It's an entry-level position from a civil service standpoint to be classified as a rec leader, which is, again, an entry-level recreation position. 10092, that is a salary line, a part-time salary line. That reduction, we do show a reduction in that. Part of that is from the staffing situation, as well as we've combined our facility cleaner and our morning fitness facility cleaner. We've combined into one role, so we're able to get a little more, a few more hours. We're able to actually use one person to be able to take care of 2 services, so we show savings on our expense from this standpoint. 97 is our summer staffing. This is obviously one of our biggest expense. Again, back to what I said earlier, we have a number of part-time staffers where our seasonal staff is summer camp counselors, program coordinators, etc. Obviously, that's a big expense, but again, we show that on the revenue side, so we show the increase in revenue. And again, it's been talked about quite a bit. 20011, which is our computer equipment and licensing. It's a significant jump, but again, we have 14 licenses that we have within our department that we pay for in regards to Microsoft, and then we have budgeted for 4 computers to be replaced. Again, as been mentioned, with the change in support for Windows 10. We've started the process, since all of our computers are operating Windows 10, to replace at least 4 of them for this coming year. 40067, like Paul mentioned earlier, a few years ago, the town changed and went over to a cloud storage system. This was huge for our department, is our RecTrack, which is our registration system. It's shifted over to the cloud, so we continue to have annual costs to be able to maintain that. Plus, this year we've also allocated some funds into that line, why there's a slight increase, because we're looking to add one of the modules that RecTrack has that we currently don't have in our operation. It's called a point of sale. We're looking to institute that as part of our registration model, which would be a huge benefit for our front offices as people come in and there's purchases for things like a guest pass or a one-day use for a yoga class. Rather than having to enter everybody in from a full system standpoint, we can actually do a point of sale, which is much faster. So it gets the person in and out faster, plus it makes it a lot easier on our end from a record standpoint. So we've added that module into our budget for 25. 70/20 from a revenue standpoint, if you want to move down to the revenue standpoint or revenue lines, all lines in 25 are either the same for 24 or have an increase. Overall, we have about $126,000 increase between all of our revenue lines. Again, we're seeing from 2003, where it's highlighted now, that's our internal program. You see that's the biggest impact. Again, this is also taking into account an additional staff person. So the ability to be able to offer additional programs, especially during the summertime, we know that there's revenue that we can generate from that. A bunch of the other programs are very similar. We're starting to see a number of those areas starting to level off in regards to just revenue-wise, and I think we're pretty consistent now where we are from a revenue standpoint. Fitness membership, we do have a slight increase. That's the first time since I've been on board that we've actually raised our fitness revenue line. Again, we're starting to see more members come in, and plus with the package now that our Premier members are able to take advantage of, we're starting to see more premier members than we have in the past, so.
Have we raised our prices, or has it been pretty consistent?
We raised it 2 years ago, and we haven't touched it since. We benchmark every year, and in all honesty, I think where we are currently is a pretty fair fee. We try not to be too high. We don't want to be, we don't want to have too low of a revenue, just because of the cost that goes into be able to maintain that. But we also understand that our taxpayers are supporting this as well. So we try to keep our membership level somewhere in that middle, and I think we do a pretty good job of that. Jay has a pretty good understanding of what's out in the community, and he has a pretty good feel for that. Those last two items, those are county reimbursements. Those are for our summer programs that we get reimbursed from. It's about $7,600 that we get every summer. Continue to put that in until that gets taken away by the county. That's gone down several years. For the last couple of years, it's maintained at about $3,800 per division, so we left that in. Again, total revenue up from 24 to 25, about $125,000. Jumping to parks. Any questions on rec side? I'm going really fast. I'm trying to keep your time going.
You're doing fabulous.
Park side. Mentioned already the full-time, savings that we have. You can see that down there on 10100. Parks foreman goes from 73 down to 0. We absorbed it into our full-time parks maintenance line with an additional GEO. Obviously, that's not as high of a classified position, so therefore we had some savings. 20059, that's the capital improvement line that I mentioned at the beginning. The large project is that we have planned for 25 is we'd like to redo the parking lot at the Arboretum. The parking lot at the Arboretum, if you've been in there, a lot is jarring.
I was there last week, and I would agree.
Yeah, it needs, it served its time well.
Yes.
So we've had a few estimates, comes in about $190,000. What we had from an outside estimate, so obviously if we could do that internally with some highway assistance, we can keep that cost down, but we just needed a number to be able to put into the budget. So I did include that, and like I said earlier, if that's included, that's obviously a significant increase in that line. You take that out, it puts the Parks Department actually very much in line with a 3% increase. So typically that line has about 20 to 25,000 that we use to do various park improvement projects or park projects. But this year, we've known for the last couple of years that we needed to do it. This past year, the town board approved that we improved the driveway to first responders, which has been such an improvement just in access. So it's time that we do the same at the Arboretum. Other than that, 40101. The vehicle lease, that's slightly down, and the reason for that is we do not have an ask for any additional vehicles. We did receive 2 new vehicles this year as part of our lease package, and one of those vehicles we had outfit with plow and lights, etc. So next year, that cost, which is an upfront cost with our lease package, we don't have to incur that, so that's why we have a slight reduction in that for next year. 40242 is our maintenance supply. That's just an increase because we see an increase in needed supplies from a facility standpoint. Plus, now that we purchased all the facility supplies for not only our department but also for town hall and court building, we're seeing an increased usage. So we'll try to keep that as in check as we possibly can, but it's just part of the operation. 40248 is our lawn service. It's a contract fee, it's a set number. However, we anticipate every year that we can come under budget on that for 25. We know our cost is going to be around $119,000. We're able to save. It's part of it is a 3-year contract. We just did it, renewed it this year, went out to bid this year and renewed the contract. So this next year will be year 2 of that. Again, with our ability to be able to save mowings when the season gets dry, or be able to hold off on cuttings, we were able to stay under that contract price. The rest of those are pretty straight numbers. The refuse number, I'm gonna guess we're probably gonna go down. We actually just went out and did a bid cycle with 3 different waste management, SAREC and it was Lilac, to do a new cost service. Actually, we ended up staying with waste management, but they reduced their fees for us. So we were able to get a better rate on our refuse. So we expect that our numbers for 25 will be under that budget.
Thank you for doing that.
We do that, we try to do that typically is whenever we start to see some fluctuation or price increases, and we started to see that with waste management.
Yeah, that's an easy one, because they do that every year.
I think it was done town-wide about 4 or 5 years ago.
It would be a great time to do it townwide again, if there's time to do it, because you can save easy 20% there. I know it's not the largest budget item, but there's still an opportunity there, and I don't think it's a huge, maybe I don't know, but it doesn't seem like a huge effort.
The last thing I will say on here from a park standpoint, the revenue line, the lodge rentals is slightly up by about $10,000. We are looking at next year into 25 changing some of our lodge fee structure. We're a little unique, and again, I've explained to this board in the past that we're a little unique in that in Webster you actually reserve a lodge a year out, so technically we're collecting fees a year prior. So it's a sort of it's a timing system. So again, we benchmark all the facilities in the area between municipalities, the county lodges. We have 2 enclosed lodges that we charge for between Curry and Liberty. And our fees are currently right about where I think they should be from a benchmark standpoint. But there's some other features between garbage collection and those kind of add-ons that we may look to in 25 and include into our costs. So we may see some slight adjustment to some of our fees in 25, which leads to the reason why we have some increase in that revenue.
Any questions?
No. Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Yep, thanks, Chris.
Judge Christine and Judge Tom.
Alrighty, well, our budget is not very extensive. It's up about $18,000 from last year, and the 2 biggest hits are 5 computers that we need to purchase apparently, and increase in security. That's about $15,500 of the budget. The rest of the figures are relatively unchanged, very minimally changed from the previous years. In terms of revenue, revenue's down. We discussed this with the board before. Is that certainly there is a tremendous drop off in the amount of tickets that are being issued. In terms of a fine set, judges certainly don't set fines with the idea of budget issues. Generally, fines are set based on the type of offense that the person's convicted of, the person's record, and frankly, the ability of the defendant to pay the fine. Certainly make an inquiry as to whether the person's working, is on disability, that type of thing. So, generally speaking, there's certainly no policy in terms of setting fines. And certainly, a few years back, when the state of New York passed a law that does not allow us to take someone's license for a period and pay a fine, there's certainly been a tremendous drop-off in the amount of fines that are actually paid. In order to close the file, we take civil judgments against those individuals. If there's allowed, we anybody peruses the daily record, we're not alone. You'll see, goes on and on to the various municipalities about simple judgments being paid. And sometimes they're paid people, they sell their house when they apply for a credit card, loan. That's when the issue comes up and they show up at the front window and pay off their fine. But other than that, like I say, the computers are the big issue. They're somewhat old, and we're told by the IT people we need to replace 5 of them. And the security is the other big issue, sort of a wild card. So.
Yeah, the security, we're gonna do an RFP for the end of the year. So we'll see how that turns out.
So that's what we stable.
Yeah, and we were saying earlier about this IT task force, like if we wanted to, the credit card payments of the fines, you're not gonna be able to get into anything in town because that goes right to Albany, right?
Well, all the fines, how that works is, I'm glad you brought that up. Fines have to be submitted to the town by the 10th of every month. That's the rules that all town and village courts are subject to. So the money comes to the town of Webster. The town of Webster then submits it to the controller's office, and then it's distributed to the state, the county, and the town by some formula after 21 years or 22 years in the budget. I still have no idea how it works.
Yeah, circle it back to us.
Right, but it's based on the type of ticket that's being issued, where it's issued, that type of thing. And so it's distributed by a particular formula to those 3 government agencies.
So it can take a couple of months to get the money back.
Right, right. So it's not like we're setting fines and boy, that's all coming to the town. That's not the case. A major portion of the state, some goes to the county, some comes to the town. But again, I think I can speak to Judge Christine here that we're still going to set fines based on trying to equalize the budget. So, any
I don't want to short your guys'
So
time.
they can, just to clarify, so they can or they cannot pay by credit card
they can, oh, certainly they pay by credit card.
down
They can
there?
pay by credit card, they can pay online too.
Okay,
Many times we tell people that if they come and they want to pay a credit card, we remind them that if they pay by cash or a bank check, they don't have that additional fee. When we first started out with the credit card, the state picked up the credit card expense, but that didn't last too long.
Funded mandate?
Right, so now the person paying the fine is picking up the credit card. And the clerks do remind them that if they pay by cash or bank check, they don't have that additional, I don't know, it was 2.5%, I think it is something like that.
But okay, so Albany said we're not gonna pick up the credit card fee anymore.
Right.
But you still have to use their credit card fee service. Because, you know what, we'll find that out during the IT task force, because if the money from the credit card payments comes to the town, and then we remit it, to get our reimbursement of 10%, 20% later on, we'll talk about that at the IT task force. Maybe they can be in with the leverage, the economies of scale.
yes.
That's for another day. You got the memo, didn't you?
I did.
So did Jennifer, right? Think day.
Chris,
Think day.
Chris had a picture on too.
Does it?
I passed out that.
Okay.
He did.
Yeah, he does.
You're already there, you're still
Great,
here.
it's great. Any questions?
Thank you very much.
No, thank
Appreciate it. Very nice to see you both.
Take care. Have a good night.
Yeah.
And last but not least, our Director of Communications.
Paul, I'm actually gonna ask you if I can drive.
To the Drum family, sorry, we're going to be starting the regular town board meeting a few minutes late.
Make it interesting.
All right.
Yeah, that's good. All right, well, I'm going to first ask the board if you mind if I show this in a little bit of a different way. There's a bit of a different circumstance with the cable access budget being absorbed by the communications department. So you'll see in this at a glance that the budget is up significantly in the communications department from last year. but that really doesn't paint the whole picture of where we are, so I'd love to take you through that. I know Kim included this presentation as well as some attachments in your folder if you want to reference them throughout. So the first major change you'll see between the communications budget this year and the cable access budget and communications budget last year is by that combination of budgets. So some assumption of duties and responsibilities from cable access that is now being taken care of by the communications department. So you'll see the $15,000 in website design and maintenance, and that's a contractual cost that is annual going towards our next redesign. And then you'll also see that we have capital purchases, and that goes towards the equipment in this room that we're going to be using to produce our town board meetings, our zoning board meetings, and our planning board meetings, as well as equipment that had previously been purchased by cable access to support digital efforts. So you'll actually see by the combination of these budgets, that's a cost savings in 2025 of $4,500. So the next slide you'll see is our second cause of additional staffing and related costs.
Can't see it.
So the first line you'll see here is part-time personnel, which was formerly $4,000 into the 2024 cable budget. Looking towards 2025, you'll see it's $5,000, and that represents the staff that is being cross-trained to produce town meetings. So currently there's 4 staff members who have stepped up, and they're really catching on and doing a great job. The benefit of the cross-training is not just to have those extra hands, but it's also to create this organizational knowledge where there's going to be no gaps in knowledge if somebody chooses or has to leave the town for any reason. So that's a change of $1,000 in 2025. The next line you'll see is probably definitely the most significant change as far as staffing in the communications department. So that's the administrative salaries line, and that is to accommodate for a new position, which is a communications assistant position. One of the handouts that I've given you is the roles and responsibilities in the communications department, and that shows my role as director of communications, and on the back side of that, you'll see the roles and responsibilities for an additional proposed position for communications assistant. But I'd like to highlight some of the roles that that person will be doing and how that's different from the existing position in the communications department. So that's going to be a heavy digital focus. I think we all can agree that we're glued to our phones, we're glued to our devices, and there's a heavy shift in the landscape towards a more digital world. And we can see businesses, nonprofits, and even other government entities that are shifting to really focusing on digital. So I would love somebody to really focus on video production, still photography, to enhance our methods and to give us opportunities that currently don't exist with the staffing model that we have. They'll also help in the primary drafting of proclamations and certificates and create plans for digital and social media. They'll draft articles for our town e-newsletter and our Webster Today newsletter publication. And they'll also be heavily involved in the production of town meetings. You'll see the communications director line. So that accounts for the step raise as well as the COLA, but also I have put in there the 2024 salary that was put in for the cable access programming coordinator. So it really comes out to, on department headlines, being a savings to the town of $61,608. Along with a new hire would come the need for additional computer equipment and licensing, which is still a cost savings from what was budgeted for last year. It's a savings of $200. And then similarly, the communications office supplies line has risen, but as a net between cable access and the communications department, there still is a savings of $900. And so for the cause of additional staffing and related costs, that's a savings of $21,708. And the final major change, I may defer a little bit to Paul here, it is the cable vision fee. You'll see it is no longer in either cable or communications, but in other revenue. And it looks like Paul has projected it to be $20,000 more this year than in last year, so I will let him speak to that line.
Yeah, overall, that's based on history. We thought it would be trending down rather quickly, but it's really held its own, and it's been coming in higher than what we budgeted, so I did bump it up slightly for 2025. I imagine in future years it will come down slightly.
What exactly is that cable vision fee?
Yeah, it's a contractual agreement we have with Charter Communications. It's based on subscriptions to cable TV. And I think what's happening, their subscribers has reduced, but they keep raising the fees. So the amount we get isn't dropping as quickly as we thought it would.
And Webster residents here have cable TV with Spectrum. Look at that guy. Well, on a line item there, I think it's 5% is the franchise fee that was negotiated years ago or whatever. And that line item for all the subscribers in Webster essentially comes to the town of Webster. When the calendar year is over, which in '23 it ended, I think in March of '24, a couple months ago, we got a check, did we not?
We did.
For the '23 franchise fees, and I think it was 500 and some odd thousand.
It was 535.
Yeah.
I can say that we've been expecting a decrease in that for years
Yes.
and have not seen it, so,
Yeah. But it's 5%, so it's real simple. If you are charging a Spectrum client $100, that's $5. But if you charge the Spectrum client $200, that's $10. And I think because their subscribers are going down at a certain percentage, but their fees they're charging to the subscribers is going up at a higher percentage. I hope that it's more of a visual, but that's why we've continued to get the $500,000 across. That's that, I guess.
Thank you, Paul. And then there are some additional minor changes. So the first cause of that is adjustments based on 2024 actuals. So last year we budgeted for $500 in seminars and conferences under the communications department line. We've budgeted nothing for that line this year, so that's a savings of $500. Whereas last year we had budgeted nothing for cellular telephone, and the $600 projected for next year is just based on actuals from this year. So that's an increase of $100. And then the final changes you'll see is due to the elimination of certain costs from the cable access department. Again, this is minor. There's a savings of $2,700 due to the elimination of the lines of $1,200 last year for telephone and internet and $1,500 for promotion. So in total, that's a cost savings between the two budgets of $28,808, which is a 16.5% savings. So I'd be happy to talk to any more of that. And in addition, I've added an attachment just with the communications department being a new department, and I don't have a fancy highway building going up, so there's no tangible building or progress that you're going to be seeing, but I wanted to provide the board with accomplishments for this year that the budget has supported, as well as objectives for next year that the budget will support. But please feel free to ask me any questions now, or coordinate with me going forward if you have any questions.
well, Bridget, I think it's totally appropriate that our communications director has got a stellar report with communication. It's great, and I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Betty.
Any questions, comments?
Appreciate the handouts, I'll be
Any questions later, I'll get.
All right, appreciate it. Thank you all.
Thanks, Bridget.
Thank you, Bridget. Well, Bridget all right, actually, do we just keep going and I start, or do we?
We actually have, we're gonna switch the video feed,
Yeah.
but that's gonna be about a 2-second,
2-minute break.
2-minute break is fine.
2-minute break, like this is the end of the workshop. We'll be back for the town board meeting. Not too shabby.
Should have been. Sorry, but I caught it.